You are working 2 jobs and can't afford rent. This is not a coincidence. This is not a failure of personal responsibility. And this is not a political talking point. This is a documented, data-driven economic shift that has been quietly reshaping American society for the past 4 decades, and most people have no idea how deep it actually goes. The middle class, the backbone of the American economy, the foundation of the American dream, is disappearing. Not slowly, not gradually. It is being systematically hollowed out from both ends, and what is replacing it will define the financial reality of an entire generation. Today we are going to break down exactly what is happening, what the middle class actually is in economic terms, how dramatically its share of American income and population has shifted since 1980, the 4 specific forces that are squeezing it out of existence, and most importantly, what is actually growing in its place and what that means for you, your kids, and the financial decisions you make right now. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, the economy you thought you understood is going to look very different. Part 1. What is the middle class really? Before we talk about what is happening to the middle class, we need to establish what it actually is, because this term gets thrown around constantly without any real definition attached to it. Economically, the most widely used definition comes from the Pew Research Center, which defines the middle class as households earning between 2/3 and double the national median household income. In 2026 terms, that translates to roughly $56,000 to $169,000 per year for a family of 3, adjusted for cost of living differences by geography. That is a wide range. And that range matters because it means a school teacher in rural Ohio and a software engineer in Austin, Texas, can both technically qualify as middle class, even though their lived financial realities look nothing alike. The middle class is also defined by something beyond income. It is defined by access. Access to homeownership, access to employer-sponsored healthcare, access to retirement savings, access to higher education for their children, access to financial stability that does not disappear with a single unexpected expense. For most of the 20th century, meeting the income threshold meant you also got the access. A manufacturing job, a union contract, a 30-year mortgage. These were the vehicles that turned a middle-class income into a middle-class life. That equation has broken down, and the data makes it impossible to deny. Part 2. The data. 4 decades of decline. In 1971, 61% of American adults lived in middle-class households. By 2023, that number had fallen to 51%. That is a 10 percentage point decline over 50 years, representing tens of millions of Americans who have moved out of the middle tier of the income distribution. Now, here is the part that surprises most people. That decline did not go entirely downward. Some of those households moved up, into upper income tiers, but a significant portion moved down, into lower income households that struggle to cover basic expenses regardless of how hard they work. The income share picture is even more striking. In 1970, middle-class households earned about 62% of all aggregate U.S. income. By the early 2020s, that share had fallen to roughly 42%. Meanwhile, the upper-income tier, households earning more than double the median, saw their share of aggregate income rise from 29% to nearly 50% over the same period. Let that sink in. The top income tier went from earning less than 1/3 of all American income to earning nearly half of it in one lifetime. And the median household income, adjusted for inflation, has grown far more slowly than productivity. American workers are producing significantly more per hour than they were in 1980. They are not being paid proportionally for it. The gap between productivity growth and wage growth is one of the most consequential economic facts of the past half-century, and it sits at the root of everything we are about to discuss. Part 3. The 4 forces squeezing the middle class. So, what specifically is driving this collapse? There are 4 forces, and they compound each other in ways that make escape increasingly difficult. Force 1. Housing. Home ownership was the single most important wealth-building vehicle for the American middle class for most of the 20th century. Buy a home, build equity over 30 years, retire with an asset worth multiples of what you paid. That math has been destroyed. The median home price in the United States has increased by over 40% since 2020 alone. Mortgage rates have remained elevated well above the historic lows that made the 2010s relatively accessible for buyers. In major metropolitan areas, where most jobs are, the median home price now requires an income that puts homeownership out of reach for a household earning the median wage. The result is a generation of renters who are building zero equity while paying record rents that consume an increasing share of their take-home income. The wealth gap between homeowners and renters has never been wider, and it widens every single year that a renter delays purchasing, which they are being economically forced to do. Force 2. Healthcare. In 1960, the average American household spent about 5% of its income on healthcare. Today, that figure is closer to 18% when you include insurance premiums, deductibles, co-pays, and out-of-pocket costs. Healthcare has become the second largest expense for most middle-class families after housing. And unlike housing, it produces no asset, no equity, and no long-term return. A single serious medical event, a cancer diagnosis, a car accident, a premature birth, can financially devastate a family that was doing everything right. Medical debt is the leading cause of personal bankruptcy in the United States. That fact alone tells you everything you need to know about how healthcare costs interact with middle-class financial stability. Force 3. Education debt. The deal that was sold to an entire generation was clear: go to college, get a degree, enter the middle class. The problem is that the cost of the ticket to the middle class has increased by over 180% since 1980 in inflation-adjusted terms, while the wage premium for a college degree has not kept pace. Total student loan debt in the United States now exceeds $1.7 trillion. The average borrower carries a balance that delays homeownership by an average of 7 years, reduces retirement savings by a measurable amount, and constrains every major financial decision from career choice to family formation. Education debt is not just a financial burden. It is a life-delaying mechanism that is reshaping the timeline of middle-class formation for an entire generation. Force 4. Wage stagnation. This is the thread that connects everything else. If wages had kept pace with productivity growth since 1979, the median full-time worker in America would be earning approximately $24 more per hour than they currently do. That is not a rounding error. That is a transformation of the American standard of living that simply did not happen. And the primary beneficiary of that unpaid productivity gain was corporate profit margins and shareholder returns. The minimum wage at the federal level has not increased since 2009, the longest stretch without an increase in American history. And while some states and cities have moved independently, the purchasing power of wages at the lower end of the income distribution has been in effective decline for decades when adjusted for the actual cost of living in the places where jobs exist. Part 4. What is actually replacing the middle class? Here is the part of this conversation that most people are not having. The middle class is not simply shrinking into poverty. It is bifurcating, splitting into two diverging economic realities that are pulling further apart every year. On one end, a growing upper middle and upper income class, households with access to appreciating assets, equity compensation, professional credentials, and the compounding advantages of existing wealth. These households own homes that are worth more every year. They hold stock portfolios and retirement accounts that benefit from market returns. They send their children to schools that reproduce their advantages. For this segment, the American economy is working extremely well. On the other end, a growing lower-income working class, households that earn enough to disqualify them from most assistance programs, but not enough to save, invest, or build any meaningful buffer against financial disruption. These households rent rather than own. They carry consumer debt at high interest rates. They have little to no retirement savings. One medical event, one job loss, one major car repair away from crisis at all times. The uncomfortable truth is that the economic forces we have described, housing costs, healthcare, education debt, and wage stagnation, do not hit both groups equally. They hit the bottom of the middle class first and hardest, pushing households downward. And they reward the top of the middle class disproportionately, as asset owners benefit from the same inflation that punishes renters and borrowers. The middle is not just shrinking, It is being replaced by a more polarized economic landscape, and the dividing line increasingly comes down to asset ownership, not income. Conclusion. So where does that leave you? The honest answer is that the rules that built the middle class, work hard, get a degree, buy a house, retire comfortably, are not gone. But they are no longer automatic. They require more intentionality, more financial literacy, and more strategic decision-making than they did for the generation that came before us. Owning assets, even small ones, matters more now than at any point in modern economic history. Understanding the difference between expenses that drain your wealth and investments that build it is no longer optional financial knowledge. It is survival-level information in the economy we actually live in. The middle class is not dead, but it is no longer something that happens to you by simply showing up and working hard. It is something you have to build deliberately, with clear eyes about the forces working against you and a strategy designed for the economy of 2026, not 1975. That is what this channel is here to help you do. Subscribe, CTA. If this video gave you a clearer picture of what is actually happening to the economy you are living in, hit subscribe. Every week we break down the financial forces shaping your life in plain language. No jargon, no political spin, just real economic context you can actually use. And if you want to understand the 4 specific moves that financially separate people who are building wealth in this environment from those who are falling behind, that video is coming next. You will not want to miss it.